So the purpose of this video is to demonstrate how to calculate ESP indicators from the survey worksheets, which will be distributed to participants of the principal survey. The discussion will take place in 4 parts. The first is an overview of the principal survey and kind of a discussion on how each question item of the principal survey corresponds to an ESP indicator as it is described in the M&E framework. The next will describe or present the worksheets that the private school respondents to the survey will have to fill out that has to do with information on students and teachers. The next is a bit of a technical refresher on the consolidate function that's part of the Excel functionality, the Excel worksheets. And there have been at least 2 other videos that have been produced which demonstrate the consolidate function, so it shouldn't be a new concept. So that's a bit of a refresher on that. And the last part of this video will have to do with demonstrating how consolidating all of the information for teachers and students, once that's done, how the related ESP indicators can be calculated using the products of the consolidate function. So on the left part of the screen is the performance management framework for the education sector plan. And what is highlighted are 2 indicators: percentage of public-private schools with implemented school improvement plans, and percentage of public schools with a practice-based professional learning communities established. Now, for those of you who have worked on the ESP performance management framework, you know that this is supposed to be captured by asking principals with respect to these 2 particular indicators. And the way that these particular indicators, which needed the input of principals both in the private and public schools, was to develop a questionnaire. So on the right-hand side, you will see that an online questionnaire was developed in SurveyMonkey. And in SurveyMonkey, each question basically corresponds to an indicator in the performance management framework. So for example, with respect to the first one, having to do with implementation of school improvement plans, that essentially corresponds to the question item here in the SurveyMonkey questionnaire, which is question item 6, which says on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 means not developed at all and 10 means fully developed, what extent does your school have a school improvement plan? And then the second indicator having to do with professional learning communities, that in turn is reflected in the questionnaire at question number 8, where it asks about the establishment of practice-based professional learning communities. So essentially, each indicator that has to be captured by consulting with principals is contained in this questionnaire. So on the left is another section of the ESP Performance Management Framework. And these group of indicators, as you can see, has to do with some education statistics that have to do with teachers and students. For example, the teacher-student ratio. Some indicator about teacher staffing activities such as resignations, non-renewal of contract, and education level, as well as information on students and teachers with respect to their citizenship. So the way in which these have to be captured efficiently is not necessarily by asking a question, but to provide data in tables. So in this particular case, private school respondents will be asked to upload a spreadsheet that contains information which allows the ministry to calculate these particular sets of ESP indicators. And so that will be the next topic that we're going to discuss in this video. So on the left, as before, you can see the indicators as per the ESP Performance Management Framework. On the right is a part of the spreadsheet which contains the tables that private schools, specifically private primary schools, are asked to fill out in order to calculate these indicators on the left. So what you see in front of you is the Teacher Information tab, which contains where the private schools will be asked to fill in information about the qualifications of teachers, divided up by male and female, their nationalities, and then their employment status. You can see that as part of the qualifications of teachers, there's a group that's defined in the ESP Performance Management Framework as qualified or not qualified. Teachers considered qualified have a bachelor's degree, and at the same time, teachers who are not qualified do not have a bachelor's degree. So you can see that there's a direct relationship between these indicators, the need to calculate them, and the information asked of the private schools. Now, the other missing bit of information has to do with student activity. We are looking at the primary school worksheet, and these tabs here are the tabs that have to do with capturing information about students in the school. So in this particular case, the private school is being asked about enrollment for K1 and K2. Now, a specific bit of information is that these years from 8 to 13 actually are the official age of enrollment for primary school students. And as mentioned in previous videos, this is important to calculate the net enrollment rate, which takes into account the number of students at the official age of enrollment. So as you can see, student statuses are asked about, such as promotions, new entrants, student repeating, dropouts, and further down transfers. And that information is asked about K1 and K2, grade 1s to 3, and grades 4 and grade 6. So this information will be captured in individual spreadsheets, and the technical challenge, I suppose, is to consolidate all of these individual spreadsheets and these individual tables and create summary tables of each of these in order to calculate this the indicators as they appear in the ESP performance management framework. So the next segment of this video is, as mentioned before, a refresher on the consolidate function, because the consolidate function has been demonstrated before in at least 2 other videos. So we're just going to do a refresher. And the last thing that needs to be mentioned is that, as you can see, this information is only gathered for private schools because the calculation of these indicators in the ESP performance management framework for public schools, that data is available in OpenEMIS. So 2 different data sources, but the same calculation. So before moving on to calculate the consolidate function, an issue about redesigning the survey questionnaire for the private schools has to be mentioned. So on the right-hand side, you will see how qualifications of teachers are asked to be recorded by private primary schools. And on the other side, you see the same information asked of private secondary schools. You can see that private secondary schools are asked to report at the individual level, while private primary schools are asked to report in a completely different way. So we have an apples to oranges problem when it comes to trying to calculate the percentage of qualified teachers in the private sector as a whole. So the bottom line is these questionnaires have to be redesigned so that comparable data is captured in the same way for all private schools. These are the steps in calculating teacher qualifications for the private schools. So the first thing that you have to do is to take the individual tables of teacher qualifications and group them together into a single spreadsheet. This is a demonstration of how you can copy the worksheet for an individual school and group them into another worksheet on the left here. So on the left is a blank worksheet which we're going to use to calculate teacher qualifications based on this table. So what you do is you open up the individual questionnaire for the primary school, and you go to the tab where the table is contained for teacher qualifications. You right click, and then there is a move or copy function, and you click on that, and it asks you essentially where you want to move this particular tab or worksheet. And from the drop-down list, you select the blank worksheet, which is here called primary consolidate function. and then you click on the Create a Copy selection, and then you select Move to End. And then you can see that it's copied that particular worksheet from Mills Institute into the new blank worksheet. And what you do is you do that for all of the primary schools. So using the procedure demonstrated previously, you can see now that all of the tables related to teacher qualifications for each of the private schools are now in one, have been copied and is now in one worksheet. And so we can actually now run the consolidate function. So to access the consolidate function, you go to the data tab and the consolidate function is right here. And what you do is you're going to add all of the tables that are required to do the consolidation of qualifications for all primary private schools. So what you do is you click on this button, you go to the first table that you want to consolidate, you click on the top left-hand corner of the table, and you select the bottom right-hand corner. So this is essentially all of the information about qualifications that you've selected. You click on this button again, and then you add it. And you do the same for all of the other tables in the other tabs. So using the procedure demonstrated earlier, we've now added in all of the tables that we're going to need to sum up all of the teacher qualification data from the individual private primary school questionnaires. So you can see that the consolidate function will sum up all of the information from the individual tables listed here. And the left-hand column, you're going to check off because these are the labels, as well as the top row, and then you press OK. So now you see that the consolidate function has summed up all of the data from the individual tables. So the previous segment demonstrated how to use the consolidate function on a different set of tables than what you see in front of you on the right-hand side, which is part of the principal survey and the worksheet that has to be filled in as part of the principal survey. But the steps to be taken are exactly the same if one were to run the consolidate function on this table from the different private primary schools. So what you see in front of you is some fictitious data, and this table basically is the end product of the consolidate function, and this piece of the table here is fictitious data having to do with employment status. And so all of the information here in this fictitious table can be used to calculate this particular indicator about percentage of teacher attrition by type and education level. So you can see here that this table contains employment status information, including those who resigned or terminated within this school year. So these two columns are essentially attrition numbers. And then the second part of this indicator is what education level. So these are indicated here. So you have basically a table that contains information on education level as well as information on employment status, specifically about attrition.